My name is Annelise. I'm 63. For most of my life, I've had one source of pride, the son I raised with whatever strength I had left after my husband died. I used to believe a mother's love could weather any storm. Turns out, the deepest pain wasn't loneliness. It was hearing my brand new daughter-in-law whisper a plan to have me committed, just to steal the lake house where my entire life's memories live. Maybe you've seen it too. Parents ignored, belittled, even exploited by their own blood. I know that feeling better than anyone. But don't lose hope. Sometimes the moment they decide you're easy prey is exactly when you can strike back the hardest. I didn't just keep my dignity. I taught the one who mocked me a lesson she'll never forget. This isn't a sob story. It's the story of how a mother, supposedly powerless, flipped the board in the middle of her son's wedding reception. Trust me, you won't see the twist coming. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, share this story, and don't forget to leave a comment wherever you're listening. Now, come back with me to that night where it all began, among white roses and the clink of champagne glasses. My name is Annelise. I'm 63, and tonight I was supposed to be the happiest woman in the room. The chandeliers poured gold over the glossy wood floors. A waltz drifted through air that smelled of white roses. My son, Daniel, in a midnight blue tux, smiled the way he used to when he'd cling to my hand on the shores of Lake Michigan. And yet, in this modern fairy tale scene, I was pressed behind a marble column, listening to a voice sweet as granulated sugar poured straight into someone's ear. "Give it 6 months," Lila whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "We'll get a competency evaluation, then take the lake house." Her friend stiffened, glancing around like the walls might be wired. "You sure? She's still your mother-in-law." "Which makes it easier. She lives alone, she's old, forgetful. I'm just helping Daniel secure his future." My heart fell clear into my stomach. I lifted my champagne to my lips and held the exact smile a mother of the groom is expected to wear. No one saw my hands clenched, bone white. The column was cool at my back. Lila's whisper was hot as a knife wrapped in silk. "The lake house in Michigan isn't a piece of property. It's where my husband proposed under a gentle September sky, where Daniel learned to swim and swallowed his first mouthful of lake water, laughing and crying at once. Every summer we hauled watermelon vanilla ice cream and old records up there. After my husband died, I sat alone on the wooden steps, watching the water change color, and understood there are memories you can't sell and must never let careless hands touch. I stepped out from the column, circled past garlands and candles. Lila spotted me and stretched a smile so wide, the light seemed to slide off the corners of her eyes. "Mom," she called, buttersoft. "I was just telling Hannah we'll come visit next week and take you to a few spas. You have to take care of yourself." "Good idea," I said, setting my glass down. "Taking care of yourself is always smart." I held her gaze. In her pupils, I watched my reflection shrink and vanish, as if someone had just pulled a velvet curtain. Daniel wandered over, loosening his tie, a sheen of sweat at his temple. "Mom, you okay? You've been by that column forever. It's crowded, I needed some air." He nodded and squeezed his wife's hand. "Lila has some ideas for Christmas. She wants to make things feel cozier for you." "I'm always cozy," I said lightly, "especially when people talk less and do more." Daniel gave a thin smile. Lila tilted her head, the smile never slipping. The way she stood beside my son reminded me of those birds that can mimic human voices, only her voice always sounded like it was soothing a wound she'd made herself. I walked to the bar. "Whiskey," I told the bartender. "Heavy pour." He lifted a brow. "Long day?" I smiled. About to get longer. The whiskey slid down my throat like a rope, hauling me back to earth. I set the glass down and scanned the room. Round tables in white cloth, a 4-tier cake, framed photos of Daniel and Lila grinning, like happiness sold by the package. I thought of the past months, how Lila began popping into my kitchen, praising my coffee, but suggesting a new machine, admiring the garden, but proposing a new pruning plan, complimenting my independence while hinting Daniel should help Mom navigate these complicated tech times. I'm polite by nature. Politeness is the coat I wear to keep the wind off. But tonight I learned something else. Politeness is not staying quiet while someone tries to strangle you with a ribbon. I lifted my glass and drifted the room. Relatives came to offer blessings to reminisce. I nodded, smiled, listened, as if the whisper I'd heard were a mirage. But in my head, a velvet box had opened. Inside weren't jewels, only cold words. Competency evaluation. 6 months. Lake house. I stopped before Daniel's childhood photos. One was fogged at the edges. Daniel on a wooden dock, arms around a float ring, eyes on me like I was the sun. I wondered which he'd choose now, me or the sun. Then I answered myself, people don't choose, they forget. The music shifted. The MC called the couple to the floor. Applause rippled. Lila rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, her white skirt gliding like a cloud. From where I stood, I still heard her little laugh, like a sewing needle, small and neat, going straight through skin. You look beautiful tonight, Daniel said. I read his lips. Lila glanced up, brushed a kiss. It'll all be ours, I guess, she murmured, not to Daniel, but to herself. One of my late husband's old friends sidled up. Annelise, I miss the lake house, he said. Robert used to swear it was the only place time slowed down. Time never slows, I said. People just get lazy about looking it in the eye. He chuckled. Still sharp as ever. Sharpness can't save a heart that refuses to hear. But sharpness can rebuild a house after a storm. I rested my glass on a side table and watched a candle drip wax onto its dish. As it cooled, it made a random shape. I saw in it the crooked road back to Michigan, the old porch, the splashy laughter of a child. Then I heard a voice behind me. Mom, I know I've been bad about calling, Daniel said, half hidden behind a floral curtain. But I need you to understand. Lila isn't bad. She just wants what's best. For whom, Daniel? For everyone. For the future, he said, as guileless as when he was 2, hiding cookies in his pocket like I wouldn't notice. Then let the future speak later, I said. Tonight I want quiet. He nodded and slipped away. Leela stood not far off, eyes rippling like a windy lake. When Daniel turned, she looked at me for exactly 1 beat, her mouth tipping up, but not into a smile. In that moment, I knew she thought I was a ripe persimmon, soft enough to collapse at a touch. I raised my whiskey again, the liquid shimmering like a vow. The MC shouted blessings. Paper confetti fluttered like counterfeit butterflies. I tipped the glass and felt heat bloom down my chest. If they think I'll stand still to be arranged, they're wrong. If they think I'm easy prey, even more wrong. I set the glass down, straightened my spine, and smiled like a lady who knows precisely what story she's in. That night, among roses and clinking glasses, I made a silent promise. I won't scream, I won't sob, I won't beg. I'll do the one thing people who bank on others' naivete never expect. I'll move first. And in the morning, something they want will be out of reach. 3 months before the wedding, Daniel brought Lila to my house on a damp Sunday afternoon. Spring was still cold, Dew clung to the wooden fence like tiny silver pins. I opened the door and hadn't even finished my hello before I saw Lila's smile. So wide it looked ready to pawn the whole evening sky for a compliment. She held out her hand, nails the color of milk, voice sweet as candy forgotten in the back of a cupboard. My son looked as bright as if he'd just swapped out his life for a newer model. "Mom, this is Lila. She loves our place," he said, eyes shining the way they did the day his grandfather slipped him his first $1. Lila dipped her head and called me one tidy, speedy word, "Mom," as if she'd been practicing. I told her to call me Annelise, or ma'am, if Annelise felt too formal. She faltered for a beat, then smiled. "Sorry, habit." I set those two words on the table like pebbles. Habit from where? With whom? For how long? We went to the kitchen. I made coffee the way I've made it for decades. Lila stood beside me, praised the aroma, and as neatly as snipping a thread, suggested different beans, a new grinder, shorter extraction so the brew wouldn't be bitter. Daniel looked at me like a star waiting for its cue to nod. I smiled, poured, set the cup in front of Lila. "Drink. If it suits you, we can discuss changes next week." At lunch, Lila praised my roast chicken for being tender, but noted my oven must heat unevenly, and maybe should be replaced. Admired my cookware, but warned against cast iron on an electric range. It scratches. Loved the roses out back, but said the canes were old and should be cut way down to force a fresh flush. Every compliment had a blade. I listened, swallowed, changed exactly nothing. Daniel was a schoolboy who'd found someone to do his homework. My son isn't bad. He just lacks a bit of backbone. On rainy days, he won't carry an umbrella. He sprints for the nearest awning. Lila is an awning with string lights. Over the next weeks, Lila appeared more often. She brought pastries, flowers, business cards for a spa I don't need. She reorganized my spice rack, labeled the salt jar, moved the flatware. I opened drawers like I was opening someone else's house. She spoke to Daniel in low tones about my health, my joints, my memory, often enough that the word memory turned fragile inside these walls. One evening, while Daniel went to get more water, Lila lowered her voice as if passing on a family secret. "I hear you manage your own investments. That's impressive. But the market's so volatile now. I think Daniel could share the load. I worry you're tired." I looked her in the eye. I saw no worry there, only numbers. "I get tired," I said, "when I have to explain things to people who don't understand them." Daniel came back, felt the chill, and forced a smile. "Mom, I just want what's best. Lila studied social work. She understands family dynamics. She's only making suggestions." I set my teacup down. The ceramic tapping the table sounded like a period. "Best for whom, Daniel?" After the meal, Lila volunteered to do the dishes. In my sink, she scrubbed like she meant to wash history away. I dried beside her and watched her lift each plate as if removing a stair from my house. She asked about the old days, how I met my in-laws, whether Daniel fell a lot as a kid. I answered just enough. She nodded, smiled, and slipped in lines that sounded like experience. Where I used to work, I met a lot of elders, still lucid but easily manipulated by their children. It's sad. I learned families need boundaries and younger people should help older folks make decisions. I dried the last plate. My hand felt cold. The next day, Daniel called, gentle-voiced. "Mom, Lila's right. You seem stressed. I could look over your accounts, help keep track." I asked when he'd start paying for the house he's living in. Silence, then a thin laugh. "Next month. We've had a lot going on." I hung up and looked into the yard. The sky had turned to rain. A few old rose leaves trembled like an ancient warning. From then on, every visit Lila brought something: a bottle of vitamins, a packet on nutrition, a pre-printed memory checklist like the flyers outside a supermarket. I asked which print shop. She smiled. A friend in healthcare, free. Free is a word I distrust. In this world, free is often the most expensive. Once Lila said I should schedule a full workup. We need a comprehensive picture of your health and your mind. She set down those last two words like stones dropped in water. I told her, my mind is clear enough to recognize when someone's stepping too far over my threshold. Daniel, awkward, tried to be a bridge. I just want things to be easy. Lila has expertise, you have experience. Combine them. Win-win. Every bridge needs solid footings, I said. What are yours? Daniel said nothing. In that silence, I felt Lila setting another brick. One afternoon, I went to fetch my old notebook for the grocery list. Oddly, it was in a different drawer. At the table, Lila poured tea and said casually, I reorganized a few things, so they're easier to remember. At our age, forgetting is normal. I looked at her for a long time. I've heard that line in many houses from many mouths, used like a master key to open cabinets that don't belong to them. That night, I called an old friend who used to coordinate at a support center. She spoke of case files in a voice tired from long roads. Sweet girls with perfectly shaped questions, young men desperate to please, mothers who opened their doors out of politeness and slowly lost their kitchens. She paused, asked if I'd ever heard of a Lila. I said yes. My friend said she'd done social work. Her specialty was geriatric assessments. I set the phone down and listened to the clock walk across the room. In my mind, one door closed and another opened. I looked around my kitchen. The labeled jars, the knives in new slots, the sink gleaming as if no one had ever cooked. Everything was so clean it had no human warmth. Next Sunday, Lila brought an apple pie. The crust was crisp, the filling fragrant, sugar dusted on top. She smiled wide as the sky and offered a slice like an offering. Try it, Mom. It's the healthy version. Less sugar, less butter, less salt. I bit in. The crust cracked like a story splitting down the middle. Tasty, I said. But life rarely stays healthy when people keep cutting out the things that give it flavor. Daniel rested a hand on Lila's shoulder and looked at me, hoping I'd change the wind. I think she just wants to be part of the family. Since when does a stranger get to become family by calling me Mom? I asked. Daniel didn't answer. Lila did, smiling. Family isn't just blood. It's a choice. I choose to love and respect you. I nodded. Respect is not rearranging someone else's kitchen without asking. Respect is not offering to manage someone's money without understanding how they earned it. Respect is not scattering memory tests across the table of a woman who remembers her life a little too well. Lila fell quiet, eyes dropping like a student grappling with a difficult word. Daniel sighed. I stood, carried the plates to the sink. On the fridge, my shopping list still hung. I took a pen and added one new line, call attorney. Snapping the cap closed, my friend's story lapped back like small waves. Social work, elder assessments, files opened and shut, signatures that tilt a life to one side. I'm not afraid of being assessed. I'm afraid of assessments used like a folding ruler, measured wrong and folded till it fits someone's pocket. That night I sat on the stoop and watched headlights slide along the fence. A name flickered in my mind, like a dark fish under lake water. Where does Lila work? Who supervises her? Which file still leaves a trace? Tomorrow I'll find out. And when I do, this kitchen will have human warmth again. For now, I closed the door, killed the lights, and kept a piece of apple pie on a plate like evidence. Because sometimes, to stop a stranger from calling you Mom, you have to show her the house has a real owner. And when the owner speaks, guests relearn their manners from scratch. I used to think the house on Maple Street was just an investment, one more brick in the foundation for a safer old age. I bought it after my husband died, planning to rent it out or sell when prices climbed. But when Daniel and Lila asked to move in temporarily, I softened. My son had just come out of a breakup, his wallet emptier than a jacket with a hole in the pocket. I told myself, the boy needs time, and I've got space to spare. On move-in day, Daniel hugged me and thanked me over and over. Lila stood behind him with a bouquet so bright it made my eyes ache. "Don't worry, we'll only be here a few months," Daniel promised. I nodded and kept quiet. In my heart, I still believed my son's word carried weight. But a few months went by and temporary turned into something else. I heard Daniel call the place our home. I heard Lila brag to her friends that they were finally settled. That word, our, hit my ear like the first cold raindrop of the season, carrying a long wind behind it. I didn't rush. I know my son forgets responsibilities sometimes. I figured a few reminders and they'd course correct, but the first month's electric bill still came to me. I called. Daniel laughed it off. "We just moved in, so many expenses. Next month." Then the next month passed, and the next. The bills stayed in my hands, and Daniel's voice grew more fluent in the language of promises. Meanwhile, the driveway suddenly gleamed with a brand new Lexus. It was so shiny I squinted when I drove by. "Whose car is that?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. "It's Lila's. She needs a reliable vehicle for her new job." I looked at that car, glossier than the truth. Daniel still had credit card debt, and Lila was transitioning careers, yet the driveway looked like a showroom. I dropped by once, pretending to bring a few things. The budget sofa I'd bought from the discount store was gone. In its place, curated pieces, coordinated to the lights and each other. "I wanted an airy, modern feel," Lila said. "What do you think, Mom?" I smiled. "It's lovely, but we'll see who it really suits." That night I pulled out the rental agreement Daniel signed when he moved in. It clearly said, "The tenants are responsible for utilities in full and will begin contributing toward the mortgage per our agreement after 6 months." I remembered stressing that clause. Daniel had nodded. Lila had smiled sweetly. The paper was still black and white. The responsibility had floated off like a balloon string, slipping into the wind. Every reminder brought a fresh excuse. We're planning the wedding. We're investing in Lila's career. We'll start next month. Next month never came. I got used to the rhythm of deceit, a lullaby, soothing and hollow. One afternoon I drove past. The windows were lit, music spilled out, and Lila's laughter tinkled like clinking glass. I saw Daniel carrying a tray of wine. They were living as if the house belonged to them, as if every board and brick bore their names. I sat in my car, heavy as stone, and then I smiled. Some games don't need an argument. They only need the right move. The next day, Daniel called, a little sharp. "Mom, I heard you drove by. That's kinda weird." I answered, light as breath. "It's my house. Passing by isn't strange." Silence then. "But this is our home." I heard that word home soft and sharp at once, a shelter and a knife. "Only when you pay for it, Daniel," I said. "A house doesn't become yours just because you happen to be inside it." He sighed, probably handed the phone to Lila. Her voice came on, gentle, steady. I know you're worried, but please give us more time. We'll make you proud. I laughed. Proud? You can't build pride out of unpaid bills and IOUs. Give me something worth keeping. I hung up before she could answer. That night, I opened the file cabinet and spread out the financials. The numbers still lined up, but my patience didn't. I thought of the lake house, of my husband, of the days when Daniel asked for coins to buy candy and promised he'd pay me back when he was grown. Turns out some promises never expire. They just turn into a burden for someone else. I sat at the table and wrote a name, Attorney Carter. The pen tip hit the page like a chess piece dropping onto wood. I knew I couldn't just watch anymore. I set the pen down, exhaled, and let a small smile rise. Lila thinks she's clever. Daniel thinks I'll always be forgiving. They both forgot one thing. A woman who survived grief and raised a son alone for 30 years does not let her house become a pretend home for someone else. Tomorrow morning, I'll walk into a law office and open a new game. Because sometimes to keep what's yours, you have to let go of someone else's make-believe. As for Daniel and Lila, they don't know the rules just changed, and this time, I'm the one writing them. Attorney Carter's office sat on the 3rd floor of an old building, the elevator groaning like it was guarding the secrets of 100 clients before me. I walked in with a neat stack of documents and a heart, with no room left for naivete. Mr. Carter has worked with my family for over 15 years. He handled my husband's will, drafted the rental for the back house, and sat with me through more tax seasons than I care to count. With him, I don't have to pretend to be fragile. He looked up from a file, surprise flickering behind the steel frames of his glasses. Annelise, what's serious enough to bring you here without an appointment? I sat spine straight, like a player taking her seat at the board. I want to sell both properties, the lake house in Michigan and the Maple Street place. Carter set his pen down, slow. Both? He pressed the word, as if hoping he'd misheard. All of it, I said, voice as firm as a safe latch. Fast, clean, quiet. I'm not chasing every last dollar. I want speed. He leaned back, fingers steepled. May I ask why? I tilted a corner of my mouth. Carter, you know I keep my own counsel. Just understand I don't intend to let one more brick chain me in place. He studied me long enough that I could hear the wall clock tick off the seconds. Then he nodded and started noting things down. If you want a quick sale, we'll list a bid under market. There is one thing, though. What? Daniel, how will he take it? The lake house is, well, it's your family's memories, and Maple Street, he's living there. I let out a short laugh. Daniel spends a lot of time thinking about things that aren't his to decide. He's gotten comfortable with assumptions. Time he learned to live with facts. I held Carter's gaze. I'll tell him when it matters. Carter gave the smallest shiver, like a man watching a river change course. He knows me. Once I decide, nothing drags me back. I leaned forward. There's something else. I want you to dig into Lila's past. He raised an eyebrow. The new daughter-in-law. Not yet a daughter-in-law, I corrected. Cool. Just someone trying to climb onto Daniel's shoulders. I want to know what she's done, where she's been, who vouches for her, who avoids her. I want the full file, work history, and any record that isn't squeaky clean. He waited a beat. That could take time. And the right sources. I have time, and I'll pay. I paused, a thin smile like a razor's edge. Carter, you once told me, if someone bites the hand that feeds them, they shouldn't be surprised when the meal gets cut off. I'm simply following through. He nodded slowly. All right, I'll get an inquiry going. But Annelise, are you sure you want to go this far? I stood, smoothing my coat. I've already gone farther. This is just the next step. The office door swung open onto a quiet hallway. I stepped out, heels tapping a steady rhythm on the tile. With each step, I felt lighter, like shrugging off a wet cloak I'd been dragging around for months. Outside, autumn sun lay across the steps. Less glare, more steadiness. I took a breath that tasted like dry leaves and the faint metal of resolve. If Daniel and Lila think I'm a docile sheep, standing still to be herded, they're in for a rude awakening. I'm no sheep. I was a sheep long enough to learn silence, patience, endurance. Now I've found my teeth. And this time, when I bite, I'll leave a mark. Night fell earlier than summer ever allows. I drove home, one hand light on the wheel, mind sharper than it's been in ages. In my head I saw a chessboard, my white pieces moving quietly. No noise, no announcement. The other side still busy laughing, busy bragging about victories they haven't won. But the move is made, and the match has begun. And they don't realize, on this board, I'm the one who writes the rules. That morning, I was making coffee when I heard an unfamiliar engine in the driveway. I pulled the curtain back and saw a white van that looked like it hauled medical equipment, parked beside Daniel's car. I frowned, not surprised, just noting a new piece placed on the board. The knocking came hard and fast. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there in a wrinkled shirt, face tight. Beside him was Lila, eyes lit like someone about to win a hand. Behind them, a man in a suit introduced himself as Dr. Franklin, and a woman in scrubs with a ready, consoling smile. Patricia, her badge read. "Mom," Daniel said, voice a notch too high. "We need to talk. This is the doctor and this is the nurse. They just want to make sure you're okay." "Okay?" I echoed, mouth curling into a thin smile. "How okay would satisfy you?" Lila slid in, sweet and chilly. "We're genuinely worried, Mom. Selling both the lake house and the Maple Street property with no reasonable explanation? Those are major family assets. Plus cutting off so many relationships, it all suggests cognitive decline and impulsive behavior." I let her read the charge sheet disguised as concern. I looked to Daniel, hoping for a flicker of doubt. He only stood there, breathing hard, a little boy forced to pick a side. Dr. Franklin stepped forward, leather bag in hand. "Mrs. Annelise, at the family's request, we'd like to do a standard 72-hour evaluation at our facility. Completely routine, safe. We'll assess memory, behavior, general mental state." I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "And if I refuse?" The nurse, Patricia, tilted her head, voice sing-song like she was soothing a toddler. "You have the right to refuse. But if the family can demonstrate you're a danger to yourself, we can seek a temporary hold. It's best to cooperate, so we can help." I laughed softly. "Help? You people love that word. Rob someone in broad daylight and call it help." Daniel shook his head, clutching his sleeve. "Mom, we don't want to hurt you, but you're not thinking things through, selling everything, saying you don't need anyone. I don't recognize you anymore." My heart dipped, but I kept my spine straight. "You don't recognize me, or I no longer resemble the thing you want to own." The air thickened. Lila squeezed Daniel's hand and stage whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "See? Denial. Classic." Then she looked me dead in the eye and widened her smile. "It's just a few days, Mom. You'll feel so much better." I drew a long breath, then smiled. "Fine. Let me pack a bag." The group exhaled as one. Daniel's eyes went glossy with relief, convinced I'd finally given in. Lila smoothed her hair, certain of victory. Dr. Franklin scribbled in his notebook. Patricia shifted, ready to tail me up the stairs. "Give me 10 minutes," I said evenly. "I'll go up and grab my things." I climbed the stairs unhurried. The bedroom door clicked shut, muting their murmurs below. I set a suitcase on the bed and flipped it open. Instead of clothes, I took out my phone. First call, Carter. "It's time," I said, brief as a gavel. "Start everything we discussed. If you don't hear from me within a week, assume I consent to the entire plan." Second call, the bank. "I need emergency access to my safe deposit box this afternoon. No, not next week. Today. It's urgent." Final call. Someone Lila would never see coming. "Detective Harris, this is Annelise Tran. I think it's time we talk about a woman named Lila, the one you once had your eye on." I snapped the phone shut and dropped it into the suitcase. Below, shoes tapped across hardwood and Lila murmured, "Everything's going to be fine." I smiled to myself. In my head, the board shifted again. This time, there were no white pieces or black pieces, only predator and prey. And if they truly believed I'd go quietly, I was ready to educate them. Because in this life, the elderly aren't always the brittle ones. Sometimes the deepest wrinkles are the map to victory. As for Lila, she had no idea that when I carried the suitcase downstairs, it wouldn't just hold clothes. It would hold paper knives, documents sharp enough to slice her little game to ribbons. And tonight the first piece would topple. The metal door clicked shut behind me with a dry snap. Outside, Daniel's and Lila's footsteps faded. Inside, the stink of antiseptic and cold plastic wrapped around me like a blanket no one wants. They call this a care facility. To me, it looked like a warehouse for the people their families don't want at home. A young doctor, slicked hair, practiced smile, led me into an assessment room. He didn't look up, just worked through a checklist. "Mrs. Annelise, how old are you?" 63, and I know it better than you do. Don't remind me." He nodded, kept going. "Do you know what day it is?" "Of course, Tuesday. The day people think they can herd me in here like an old goat." His eyebrow twitched, but he kept writing. "Who's the current president?" "The President of the United States. Still the one plenty of people wish wasn't." I tilted my head. "How about you? Do you remember who the mayor of this city is? Or am I the only one getting quizzed?" A flush crept up his neck. Then came the short-term memory test. "Repeat numbers back." I repeated them cleanly and added, "You're 34. Don't lecture me about aging. I've had 30 more years of practice than you." The room went quiet for a beat before he tapped his pen again and pretended not to feel the jab. After the little interrogation, they took me to a resting room. Bed tucked tight, white sheets like they could bleach the history off whoever lay down. I sat, fingers laced, and pictured Lila outside, soothing herself with the idea that she'd won. That afternoon, a nurse came in. Early 40s, knife-sharp eyes, warm voice. "I'm Angela," she said. "I'll be with you the next few days." I studied her. No cheap pity in that look, just experience. While she took my blood pressure, she murmured low enough the monitor wouldn't pick it up. "Write everything down. Conversations, tests, how they look at you. People like them play dirty. Without proof, you lose on their home field." I nodded, a little heat returning to my chest. "Thanks. I don't plan to make this easy." 2 days passed. I answered every memory test, every mood question. They wanted me irritable, confused, forgetful. I answered clearly, and when it suited me, with a little sting that turned the young doctor pink. Each time I flipped the script, Angela pressed her lips to hide a smile. Proof that someone here still cared about the right thing. Late on day 2, Angela slipped me a brown envelope. "Someone sent this for you," she said, eyes looking anywhere but at me. Inside was a thick packet, stamped by Detective Harris. I read every line and felt myself go cold. Lila had been named in 2 civil suits for exploiting the elderly. Both settled quietly. The victims took small payouts and disappeared from the record. One prior fraud conviction 5 years ago, in another state. Suspended sentence, the file buried under dust. Most important, every one of Lila's targets had been older, with significant assets. I closed the file. My heartbeat stayed steady but stronger. So this wasn't her first game. I was just the next chapter in a book she's written over and over, full of supporting characters who vanished off stage. That night I lay under the dim light, staring at the ceiling. I thought about Daniel, my son who trusts sugar water words more than the mother who raised him 30 years. I thought about Lila, the woman who wields a smile like a scalpel and slices through trust. And I thought about myself, a widowed woman they thought they could steer like a sheep. I rolled onto my side and whispered into the dark. "No, not this time. The wolf's ready." Angela stopped by with a pen and a small notebook. "Write," she said. "When they ask, you'll have evidence. When they flip the script, you'll hold up a mirror." I took them and began recording every exchange, every dumb question, every detail. Each line was a thorn laid on the path they planned to march me down. By day 3, the wind had changed. The young doctor looked less sure. His eyes kept slipping away. Angela flashed me a quick thumbs up. Between the file in my hand and the record I was building, the blade was finally in my grip. I sat up straight and waited for the door to open again. They wouldn't quit. There'd be more plays. But this time, I held the board. In the dim light, I shut the notebook and smiled thinly. They thought 4 walls would make me weaker. All they did was lock me in a war room. And when I walk out, it won't just be an old woman coming back. It'll be an enemy they were never prepared to face. I left the facility labeled a patient deemed competent, but in truth, I walked out a woman who'd just won the opening round. The young doctor managed a stiff smile and said my memory was well within normal limits. I answered with a nod and a smile sharp enough to cut paper. Lila flicked a look at Daniel, signaling that everything was still under control. She had no idea the board had flipped long ago. That evening I called Daniel, using the soft voice every American mother knows. "Honey, I want to do a little dinner so we can reset as a family. 7 o'clock tomorrow. Come by, both of you." Lila chimed in on the line, sweet as brown sugar. "That's wonderful, Mom. I'll bring a bottle of wine." "Just come," I said. "I've got everything ready." The next call was different. "Detective Harris, everything's set. 7 p.m. They'll be on time." His voice dropped, steady as iron. "I'll be there. And this time, she won't walk." At 10 till 7, I set the table. Nothing fancy. A few simple dishes, wine breathing, white roses in a crystal vase. The house was warm, bright, every inch a picture of home. But under the surface, each knife and fork sat where a final move on a chessboard would go. 7 sharp, the doorbell rang. Daniel and Lila came in with a bottle of red. Daniel tried for cheerful, voice trembling. "Mom, I'm glad you're okay. We can start over." Lila added, "Me too, Mom. Family is what matters." I gestured to the table. "It is when it's truly a family." Right then, the back door opened. Detective Harris stepped in. Tall, lean, trench coat, eyes cold. Daniel jolted. "Who is this?" I answered slowly. "This is Detective Harris, Lila's half-brother. Same father, different mother. And the reason tonight isn't just another family dinner." Lila's face froze. That permanent smile vanished like washed-off makeup. "Danny, what are you doing here?" she snapped, losing her grip. Harris pulled out a chair, sat, and set a thick file on the table. He pinned Lila with a look. "I'm here to finish the job I should have finished years ago." Daniel glanced from me to Harris to Lila. "Mom, what is going on?" I set a hand on his shoulder, gentle but firm. "You're about to hear the truth, Daniel, and it's going to hurt." Harris opened the file. The shuffle of paper sounded like a drum roll. Lila, also known as Lisa, also known as Jessica, has lived under at least 3 names, each tied to schemes targeting older adults with assets. He paused, then met Daniel's eyes. 2 civil cases where the victims lost their homes. In another, an 83-year-old woman spent the rest of her life in a nursing home after signing a power of attorney Lila prepared. Daniel's mouth fell open. "No way. Let's say something." Lila sprang up. "They're lying. I love you, Daniel. This is your mother's plot. She's jealous. You chose me over her." I gave a thin smile and pointed at her hand. "Then explain the ring you're wearing, Lila. Where'd that come from?" Daniel followed my gaze to the old gold band, initials etched inside. Harris nodded. "That's Margaret Thornfield's wedding ring, one of the deceased victims. Police documented it missing along with her assets." Lila yanked her hand under the table too late. Daniel's chair scraped back. His hands shook. "Oh God, Lila, what did you do?" "It's just a keepsake. I don't know where it came from," she stammered, voice fraying strand by strand. I set down my glass, voice level. "You believed in love, son, but you were just another piece she moved to get closer to the money." Harris stood and pulled a printed form from his pocket. "Lila Wells, or whichever name you're using, you're under arrest for fraud, use of forged documents, and suspected financial exploitation of the elderly. You have the right to remain silent." Daniel sat stunned, and I stayed seated, watching it like a play I'd waited a long time to see. Another officer came in through the back, and cold cuffs closed over the same hands that had pretended to serve tea in my kitchen. Lila turned on me, eyes sparking, the mask gone. "You think you've won? Daniel will hate you forever. You just destroyed his life." I only smiled. "No, Lila, I just saved it." The cuffs clicked, and they led her out. Daniel sank into a chair, face buried in his hands. The room went quiet except for the clock ticking us into a new era. I lifted my wine, the red glowing under the light. I didn't feel triumph, only a strange, settled peace. The war wasn't over, but the net had closed. And I knew the hardest part started now, helping my son look at me not with bewilderment, but with the trust he'd misplaced. Beating the enemy is one thing. Winning back your own child, that's the real battle. And tomorrow, that's the fight I'll face. As the door clicked shut behind Lila, the room sank into silence. The bite of the handcuffs still rang in my head, like a bell announcing the end of a battle. Daniel dropped into a chair, face in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red, and the tears that fell looked like the first blood of a child who's just realized he's been betrayed. "Mom," he whispered, voice splintering, "she made me believe you were the problem." My heart clenched. I'd braced for this moment, the moment my son saw the truth. Yet it still hurt. I sat beside him and set my hand on his shoulder. "Daniel, I forgive you, but remember, forgiveness isn't forgetting. This wound will scar, and scars exist to remind us a knife once cut the skin." He folded into my shoulder and cried like the little boy who used to stumble on the lake house beach. I let him cry. No scolding, no soothing. I let him feel the loss he helped create. Some lessons only etch deep when they're washed in tears. 6 months passed. I no longer lived in the Maple Street house full of ghosts, and I let go of the lake house with its mixed bag of joy and grief. I sold them both and bought a small condo by a different lake not far from town. The balcony faces the water. Each sunrise skims the ripples, and my chest feels lighter. Quiet doesn't mean dull. I learned to enjoy the stillness, tending pots of herbs, brewing coffee the old way, finishing books I'd left half read. Happiness, I discovered, isn't how many houses you own. It's knowing the place you live isn't eyed by anyone and isn't under threat. Daniel changed too. He found steady work in tech. Nothing flashy, but enough to stand on his own. He went to therapy, learned the difference between love and manipulation. Our monthly dinners came back, awkward at first, then warmer. Instead of dodging, he started asking for advice, not about money, but about living. I saw in his eyes the light of a man finally growing up, no longer hiding behind a woman in a white dress with a pitch-black soul. As for Lila, she got 5 years. When the judge read the sentence, I felt no gloating and no pity, just relief, like finally locking an old room and throwing the key into the lake. Detective Harris called after the hearing. 5 years may not be enough, but it's enough for a lot of people to sleep easier. I said, justice doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to remind the wicked the world isn't always asleep. One weekend evening, I sat on the balcony, a glass of wine in hand, watching the sun sink red into the horizon. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Annelise, my name is Sarah Chen. Detective Harris gave me your number. I think my stepmother might be doing to my father what Lila did to you. Can we talk? I read it twice, feeling the blood warm in my veins. Another person, another story, same cut. I smiled and typed back. Of course. Tell me when and where, because I know this well. Gold diggers don't disappear, they just change faces, and people like me, people who have already burned once, owe it to others to turn the ashes into a guiding light. I took another sip, looking out at the lake. The world is still full of deceit, and the young still get pulled into sugar-coated traps, but I don't feel alone anymore. I've lived through loss and betrayal, and come out with the truth. Motherhood can be tested, but it can't be broken. Daniel still has shadows to shake off, but at least he's walking, one steady step at a time. As for me, I will never again be the meek sheep waiting to be led. I've found the wolf's teeth, and once I bite, I don't let go until justice is done. I set the glass down and laughed to myself. People say retirement is for gardening, dogs, and knitting. For me, it turned out to mean something else. Turns out retirement isn't about gardening. It's about teaching gold diggers a very expensive lesson. And that text was only the start of a new chapter. When one story closes, sometimes it's just another cover opening, and I don't seem to be running out of an audience for the next rounds of chess. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.